Hello everyone, welcome to Perf Guild Day 2 and I'm Christina Thalayasingam and I'm glad to be part of this Perf Guild. So I'm a senior quality engineer at Sysco LABS, been in the test automation field for about 4 years now, and I am very much interested in not just the non-functional test automation but also functional test automation as well. And a couple of you might have seen me in few of the Selenium conferences that happened in the last few years. So that's about myself. You guys can follow me on Twitter as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about tips and tricks on using Jmeter. So basically I'll be covering the importance of performance testing. I know we are in a Perf Guild, but for those who are beginners and who are interested in starting performance testing, and then I'll start talking about Jmeter and then the tips and tricks on how to use it in a very sophisticated manner. So what is performance testing? So we know that performance testing is basically putting our system into a drastic load so that we can know if our system, as the days go, will be able to handle a massive load, right? And also to understand the bottlenecks or which part of the system has difficulties in handling massive load. And also there are aspects like endurance testing, where over a period of time we give little amount of load so that we understand how the system can perform within that given particular time, right? So Jmeter is one of the popular performance testing tools, and if you see it's been in the industry for a very long time, and yeah, it's with the Apache community and it's open source, and that's very helpful because there's a lot of tools like BlazeMeet and Redline who use Jmeter, the JMX files, and build more sophisticated performance testing tests. So we can use Jmeter to start learning because it's open source and they have grown over time. So currently they're on version 5 and there's a lot of features that lots of the users who use Jmeter are not aware of, and they tend not to use it, but it helps your testing. So today we're going to concentrate on that, and this is very tool specific, but it'll be helpful for those who are interested. Next, we'll be talking about why should we use Jmeter. So one of the main things I said is it's open source and hence anyone can get their hands on it, right? And the next thing is it's applicable not just for web services or web application, but also you can use it for JMS, database and so on, right? FTP and all. And then you can run it on command line. You can add some code snippets, make your test more sophisticated, which I'll be covering in the tricks section. And it has a full-featured IDE, so it's helpful. Like, you know, you don't really have to script a lot for straightforward performance testing. So it's helpful for beginners especially. And moreover, there's a lot of samplers, plugins that are now available in the market or in the industry that really helps us to have sophisticated Jmeter tests. So enough of all this, let's get to the point, right? So this is the tip 1 that I have for you today. So I'll be covering this in a little demo at the end of the session. So this is tip 1, pave the way using throughput controller. So I know pave the way doesn't sound right with throughput controller. Even the Apache Jmeter community accepts the fact that throughput controller is not the right word for this controller. So ideally what it does is, if you are going through a system, for example, if it's an e-commerce system, not all users would be logging in and searching for an item, right? There will be a certain amount of users who will be checking their cart or their order history. So we take a percentage and we divert the number of users. We say 100 users are coming into the system, but not all 100 users will be searching. So how do we do that? Jmeter helps us. So if you can see in the screenshot I've given, a 75%, and the 75% goes through the Blaze Meter call, whereas 25% calls Google. So and there you go, I've given four users, so 75%, 3 users are going through Blaze Meter, right? Moving to the next tip. This is one very good feature that Jmeter has, especially targeting reusability, but lots of people don't really use this very much. But again, this is to minimize the large, right? You have loads of calls that are being reused in loads of the tests. If you have a massive Jmeter script, how do you want to make it smaller? So this is very helpful. I'll be covering this in the demo as well. So we will be having test fragments. These can be added to your test plan, and then you can have your HTTP request or API call part of the fragment, and then using the module controller, as you can see in the screen, that will be the point where you will be selecting those fragments. So you don't have to, so every time you want to use a particular call, you would be only just adding a module controller, which I'll be showing in the demo as well, and then you would be selecting the particular fragment. That's like cake, right? Every time you will be just adding the module controller and selecting the fragment. So what you can do is organize all the test fragments at the end of the test plan and then reuse them whenever you need it. So that's quite a helpful tool as well. So next we have tip 3. So this is something that many use but still struggle to understand how it works. So manipulate the response wisely using regular expression extractor. There are many who don't even know that this particular extractor exists. They tend to write their own bean shell script. There are others who don't know that there are facilities where you can break down the regular expression into groups, like you see on the screen now. So what I've actually done is this particular response, I need to pick up the item code, the item name, and the URL for that item. So I mentioned it in a template, right? Item 1, the group 1, group 2, and group 3. Once that is being mentioned, I'll be able to pick up the item according to the group. So as you can see, I'm here, I'm in the next request. Based on the response that I'm getting, I'm using the item URL. So that's the group 3. So I'm using G3. So this is something that is very helpful, but I tend to see lots of people using regular expression extractor multiple times. Like they would just write one for the code and one for the name and one for URL. If it's all in one stream, just use one, because it's going to affect your script performance, right? That all, I think those who've used Jmeter a bit would understand that it is an open source tool. It does have a few restrictions. So we need to make sure that our script is efficient enough to run a performance test. So don't put a lot of these extractors and samplers and so on and make this test more slow. So what you can do is use one extractor for one response and try to grab as much as you can from that using the regular expression extractor. So that's one way of using it, and I'm sure that'll be very helpful for those who weren't aware that this was possible. Next tip, the tip number 4, is sharing among groups, right? So for this, we use something called inter-thread communication. So this is actually very helpful. Again, this is rarely used. We tend to use a bean shell script or something of that sort to transfer the data from one thread group to the other. So there are lots of instances where you want to transfer tokens from this thread group to the next thread group, and most of the people I've seen use bean shell. But there is something called inter-thread communication, and I will just show it to you over here. So in the previous thread, the thread that you are going to carry the particular item, you will have to use the inter-thread communication post processor. So make sure that you have the inter-thread communication plugin add to your Jmeter using the Jmeter plugin manager, which is now more easier rather than putting the jar files into the lib folder. So you just have to add the plugin and restart it. So here you will have to add the post processor and save the particular value that you're getting from the particular thread, right, the previous one, and then in the next thread again get that. So here you put it, here you get that value, and then after that use a dummy sampler. I'm just using a dummy sampler for you to understand that whatever I've got in the previous thread I have used in the next thread using a dummy sampler. So let's move to the next view. So you can see that I have used two thread groups, the first thread group and the second. In the first thread group I'm just calling Blaze Meet or Blaze Demo, and which that is basically, if you go to that URL you'll understand it's just selecting random cities. So I am calling that particular URL and I'm extracting using the XPath extractor, and using the XPath extractor I get a value, and that's what I have saved here. That's so my departure cities to the departure queue. So what ideally it would do is save it, and then for the next thread it would pull it out and save it. So this is the variable that we saved the value, and then this variable value is then stored to the next variable, which is basically used in the particular thread in this next thread. And then you can see I've run that dummy sampler. So what I'm trying to do is print out the second thread variable over here, and you can see that it's printed out Boston. So that is all the main tips that I have for you guys today. Let's move into tricks. How do we trick Jmeter to do what we want it to do? So if you guys are working with systems where we consider like content management systems, or you want to upload multiple documents at the same time and try to download it or edit it and so on. So I came across this situation before. I didn't want to have multiple documents in my system, so I came up with this idea where we can have one document, keep renaming it and uploading it, because there will be a restriction of uploading the same name document. So what I did is, as you can see on the screen, I handled it with a loop controller, and I've given a particular number. So you can, I've set it as a variable, so you can have a certain number that you need. So the idea here is basically every time the loop runs you have two counters, right? So I would be saving this as you can see, because these are again files that I am specifically creating to delete or download or basically check in, check out and so on. So I'm having a particular number set, and then I'm going to increment it, and meanwhile rename this particular file using Jmeter. So basically the document will be renamed in the fly, and that's quite helpful because we were only maintaining one document for the whole action. So you can see that for the download action, so since I had other actions to be covered as well, you can see multiple documents here. But if you're only considering one, then you would only have one, as here you can see. And then we have the counter here. So I have the counter that's incrementing by 1, and I have the counter that is less than the current one, less than the current count. So what ideally we would be doing is giving the loop counter and the file name, that is I'm using download ppt. So I'm going to give that and upload. So we have all the other values. It's a post call and I'm uploading it here. So as you can see, this is the bean shell preprocessor. This is what I'm using to make my Jmeter do this document renaming on the fly. So you can see that I have initially picked it up with the loop counter, which is the less than 1 value, or take the counter 1 value to the index number, right? And then I'm giving the second counter here to the another variable. So what I would do is pick up this particular value, right, and rename it. So every time the counter increases, it would pick up a particular value, pick up the current one and then rename it, and then you would be uploading that. So there is no sort of necessity to have multiple files, and that's going to be helpful. So this is not just about handling content management, right? There's other things as well. You want to see messages, you want to see if there's a bulk uploads working fine with multiple files being uploaded every millisecond or so on. So this is helpful, and also for data creation and stuff like that. So it has been quite handy with my experience in Jmeter, and I hope it will be handy for you guys as well. Trick number two is basically comparing content value of a file with response of Jmeter. So there is a way to use JSON files and compare, or even use multiple JSON files and send post requests, right? So here we can also compare. So whatever you download, for example, just to make sure that it is the right file that you're looking at, you can have those particular files stored. Now, for example, whatever I uploaded is one single file and the content in it is the same. So therefore, I can compare it by giving an assertion. So file to string, and I will be comparing the response based on that, right? So I would say let it be, it should be equals or contains and so on. So this is something that's kind of helpful, because you don't have to manually go and check the document whether it's valid or it's not corrupted and so on. So that's also something that's very helpful when it comes to performance testing as well. So moving further, we will be having the sources. You can see the sources here. I've mainly looked into the Jmeter blog and Blazemeter as well. Blazemeter also has a lot of documentation on Jmeter and the tricks and tips around Jmeter, so you can use that as well. So I'll quickly do a quick demo for you guys. So as I mentioned, this is a test plan. I've got my defaults. You can have a cookie manager if you want. So these are the usual stuff for all those who've used Jmeter. You'll know these aspects. So I've actually already created the test fragments here. So what I did is I went into test plan and I right clicked and I added basically test fragments, as you can see, right? So I've done that already, and you can see these are all my test fragments. So I'm going to search for parrots. So as going into Wikipedia, I'm going to search for parrots and dogs. We love dogs, and cats. So this is basically a very basic demo. So these are all test fragments, right? And what I'm going to use is the throughput controller. So what I'm going to do is give a percentage for each of these calls. So I'm going to say, I'm going to right click here and I am going to I'm going to right click here. So I've added a simple controller saying Wikipedia search, and I am going to add a module controller. Right, let's do that. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is basically select what I want, like I told you. So here we have navigate to Wikipedia. So that's what I'm first going to do. That's the first activity I'm going to do. Next, I'm going to add a throughput controller, right? So this is basically going to give a particular percentage of this many users. You can either give a percentage or you can give a total execution. So I prefer percentages, so I'm going to give 40% of my users need to go through this particular call. So let's again add a module controller. Okay, and I'm going to search for dogs because everyone loves dogs. Okay, and then next let's add another throughput controller, right? And I'm going to say 30% of my users are going to add cats. So I'm going to search for cats. So that's 30%, and then you say 40%, and then we'll give a 20%. So then there's 10% left, and 10% of users don't search for anything. They just stop by just going to Wikipedia. That's the idea over here. So again, this is, sorry, it's not module controller. Add. So this is basically a basic idea that I'm giving to you just to understand how test fragments work and how easy it is. So every time, so I don't even need to keep on selecting. So I can just copy and paste it here and then just go and select the one I want. So you can see we have all the module controllers selected here. It's quite easy, right? I didn't have to even go and select module controller. I just go and copy and paste it. That's it. So let's now run this test and see how the test runs, right? Just give me a minute. Okay. Okay, so I need to change the number of users here, so that's the problem. Yeah, so I'm just going to clear it and run it for 10 users. So as you can see, it's running for 10 users, but the particular navigation was done for 10 users through navigate to Wikipedia, but 4 users searched for dogs. So 40% of 10 users, 2 users, that's 20% of 10 users used search for parrots, and 3 users, that is 30% of 10 users, searched for cats. So there's one less, so that's what I said. One would just stay there, navigate to Wikipedia, and that's where they stop. So you can control the number of users and you can pave the way, as well as use reusable factors here. And also, as I mentioned, regular expressions and stuff will be handy when you move forward. So I hope this was helpful for you guys, and if there is any questions, yeah, you can feel free to ask from me now, or you can contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or you can also have a look at these details regarding Jmeter, especially the tricks. I have created blogs on that on my WordPress document as well. So thank you once again for listening and being present at this conference on behalf of Joe as well. Thank you very much.